The Iron Scourge are a force of iron warriors made up from the remnants of the 27th Line Company from the 3rd Grand Battalion of the 4th Legion. Mostly consisting of 950 or so veterans, though there are 550 new warriors created throughout the long centuries present within the warband. They favor heavy infantry assaults with heavy armor and heavy artillery supporting and reinforcing the attack. There are also many demon engines that are created by the leader of the warband, a warpsmith named Ogdramok. The variants include large numbers of Mauler Fiends and Forge Fiends, Defilers, and a small number of Decimators. Mutilators and Obliterators make up a small amount of the Astartes. Seen as no better than a slave to be mowed down by enemy guns, they prove very effective at being shock troops. Vast amounts of tanks are used by the former 27th Line Company, either stolen, scavenged, created or repaired by the Mechanicum Adepts attached to the warband. Originally part of the 4th Legion Iron Warriors, the Line Company served in mostly armoured assaults, line-breaking, siege-breaking and boarding actions during Void Wars throughout the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. They remained a part of the main Iron Warriors forces until the Dispute of Iron, when they were led by Ogdramok to venture out and raid in their own right. They had not expected to be attacked by other loyal sons of Perturabo, thinking that they had been betrayed or otherwise forsaken, and thus consigned to death by other 4th Legion forces. Not wishing to be the decimated, they resisted and fled Medringard aboard their vessel, the Bone Rod, after withstanding the onslaught of once trusted Iron Warriors. The Iron Scourge are an infamous Chaos warband comprised of heretic legionaries of the Iron Warriors Traitor Legion. The core members of this warband are made up of ancient Horus Heresy veterans. The vehicles and weapons utilized by this warband harken back to the bygone era of the Great Crusade, which is still present in this 4th Legion force. Mastodons and heavy Typhon pattern siege tanks serve to this day. The weapons used by these heretic Astartes are all mostly ancient relics of that era, and there are even rare Volkite patterns protected and used by the few remaining Techmarines. 6 Leviathan Siege Dreadnought chassis have been preserved since the Iron Warriors first ventured the stars in the name of the Emperor. Many Astartes have occupied the heavy sarcophagi, all of them becoming deranged and succumbing to the debilitating madness that is inevitable when kept in the half-life of a dreadnought. One of the newer vehicle patterns in the arsenal of the Iron Scourge are 2 formations of Doomhammer super heavy tanks. Despite the emphasis on heavy infantry and armor, there are a few thousand professional soldiers of the old Seleucid Turakitai, now known within the warband as the Vorakan Host, where the lost and the damned find their place when enslaved by the Iron Scourge. However, these mortal warriors are valued highly by the Astartes, acting nearly as an exact counterpart to the regiments of the Imperial Guard, disciplined and organized, with captains and commanders. Their combat doctrine mirrors that of their Astartes masters. Squads of a Rock and Host are often attached to squads of Space Marines, serving as a support role. However, they are often just used as bodies to storm a breach or to fill a trench, accepting their part in the warband. Great Crusade era engagements. These are campaigns that the 27th Line Company took part in. Also includes the deeds of Sergeant Monas. Varian, unknown date, M30. Defended a Mechanicum stronghold against an Orc invasion. Thasda 6, unknown date, M30. Boarded human warlord's flagship, successfully secured the bridge along with 2 other breacher squads. Breg System, unknown date, M30. Took part in the besieging of many Xenos-held fortresses on human-populated planets. Hakronia System, unknown date, M30. Void conflict against a fleet-based human civilization that utilized Xenos and AI technology. Boarded 8 vessels during the conflict, was some of the worst fighting conditions he would ever experience before the Heresy. Carrion System, unknown date, M30. Besieged all 9 worlds, including their moons and orbital stations of a human civilization that produced AI. Out of all the squad members, only Monas, the sergeant, and 3 others survived. Pacification of Gugan, 004 M31. Fought with the main battle strength of the Legion against the revolting Hrad. Monas was one of the sole members of his squad left alive and was aged 3 decades according to the apothecary. Olympia Genocide, 004 M31. Like most of those Iron Warriors that had served since the beginning of their father's reign, the 27th Company were too embittered and dour by years of fighting to question the orders, executed many civilians, and personally oversaw the capturing and internment of the population, now turned slaves and auxilia, of a minor yet large settlement located in the northwest part of the northern continent. Horus Heresy era engagements. These entries mainly cover the deeds of Sergeant Monas. Dropsite Massacre of East Farm 5, 566006 M31. The 3rd Breacher Squad were in the second wave of craft that descended onto the drop site, soon followed by the majority of the 27th Company. With bunkers and fortifications already half-built, the 3rd Breacher Squad secured a forward section with 2 heavy weapons teams, protecting them with their shields when the betrayal was unleashed, firing their weapons when an enemy got too close, and lobbing grenades into the masses below. Battle of Fal, 007 M31. The company were aboard a smaller capital ship during the conflict, named Tyrant of Rakiphos, and took part in successfully repelling a number of Imperial Fists boarding actions. However, the Tyrant would be crippled during the latter stages of the fighting. Many legionaries and crew would evacuate onto the Iron Blood. The 27th Line Company saw no action during Hydra Caudatus or Iodes, though they were present aboard a heavy cruiser belonging to the 15th Cohort for the duration. Battle of Talon, 010-011 M31. The duties of the 3rd British Squad mainly consisted of guarding weapon stockpiles, riding in Land Raider scouts, patrolling areas and the frequent raid on Imperial bunkers, while the rest of the company engaged in the chaotic and vicious tank battles that marred the surface of the Scout planet, as well as supporting the formations of battle titans that marched through the poisoned terrain. Antonok, Ultramar, circa 012 M31. After consolidating his forces upon Talon, Perturabo received orders from Horus to defend worlds threatened by Ultramar. And so, upon the world of Antonok, Monas assaulted the forces of invading PDF along with an armored unit of super heavy tanks. The fighting was mostly focused in the Hive cities. He managed to destroy 4 enemy tanks with a melter gun and crack grenades by outflanking them and gaining hidden vantage points, then targeting weak points and areas where ammunition would be stored inside. The engagements were fast-paced and furious, never lasting longer than 10 minutes. Was the last warrior on the squad transport, yet managed to withdraw back to the fleet. Deluge, circa 013 M31. One of Monas' personally proudest moments. When Horus requested Angron be curtailed and brought to Alanor, Monas began to look forward to the confrontation. And when deployed and arrayed in full military order upon the planet's surface, he felt the surging pride of being an Iron Warrior, gazing upon his shield-bearing counterparts and the mighty tanks adorned with Legion iconography. Having been fully briefed and drilled for what the Primarch needed his sons to do, Monas moved with his brothers as one to quell the tide of lunatic world-eaters. A most satisfactory engagement where tactics and discipline overcame martial brutality. Siege of Terror, 014 M31. Remaining a part of Perturaba's fleet when they entered Sol System. Was deployed during the siege to fight in and secure the underground breaches that had been made. When Horus died, he once again managed to live to fight another day. Fled with the rest of his legion. Notable post-heresy engagements. These also cover the actions of Sergeant Monas. Sebastius IV, Battle of the Iron Cage, circa 014-021 M31. Manning a small yet fortified underground complex with the entrance purposefully uncovered, he and his squad were tasked with blocking and trapping any Imperial Fists who came their way. The tunnel had holes in the ceiling near where Runham's squad lay in wait for their brothers above to drop grenades down atop the Imperial Fists. When any enemies came into sight, they immediately opened fire behind their mighty shields. Survived despite being injured in the melter blast that killed his sergeant, being dragged away by a Legio apothecary. After this, he finally fled into the Eye along with his father and brothers. Foreigners, unknown date M32, sent to this planet within the Eye, soon after establishing a barracks on Medringard to base the 27th Line Company alongside the remnants of the 3rd Grand Battalion. Upon entering the orbit of this planet, he was sent to retrieve slaves from a small band of rogue Emperor's children on the surface. He and other elements of the soon-to-be warband slaughtered all the sons of Fulgrim and incinerated their cadavers. They made off with roughly 1,300 mortals and travelled back to their new homeworld. Medringard, unknown date, late M32. A small border and slave dispute between another warband. The fighting was quick, yet very bloody. 50 Marines in total died, but his warband defeated the other decisively. It was mostly close quarters, indoors combat, and Monas led his squad deep into the opposing faction's territory, gaining multiple storehouses and mechanical fabrication supplies, as well as a Medicae facility. He personally slew 6, not caring that they were once his fellow Legion brothers. Boarding action, unknown date, M33, inside the Eye. During an excursion to find and gather materials to aid in construction on Medringard, the warband was ambushed by a smaller World Eater's vessel and boarded by Cornet Marines. Having experienced these types of fights many times, he led his squad and many other battle brothers in repelling the attack, despite the fury and savagery of the foe. Even defeated a lesser champion by pulverizing his skull with quick jackhammer blows with his armored fist. Hiob 2, M33, Forge World. The Warpsmith leader, Ogdramok of the Iron Scourge, had brokered a deal with a secret heretic group on this world. In exchange for teaching them the knowledge of binding a demon to a war engine, they would swear fealty to him, as well as lending aid in a revolt to cast off any imperial ties. The small Iron Warriors fleet successfully came into close proximity over the planet and immediately launched a devastating bombardment over the main forge complexes. Monas' squad was sent in an advanced underground assault in support of a team of Terminators in order to destroy the central command. Medringard, M34, Dispute of Iron. Consolidating their numbers and mending their armor and weapons after some uneventful slave raiding throughout the Eye, the as of yet unnamed force of fighters belonging to the 27th Line Company found themselves defending their holdings against their own Legion brothers, fortifying the towers, garrisons and bunkers belonging to them even further, and butchering any who dare take all they possessed from them. Holding out in the galleries of a garrison building, Monas was forced to bitterly stand guard with his squad and those fighters inside the garrison at the time. Against hordes of baseline slaves and many Marines, he found himself in the same position during the Iron Cage. Instead of waiting for the inevitable, he decided to gain ground and push out, taking some Astartes by surprise. Yet, no sooner than he had taken a large slave pen that the fighting died down and stopped. Herkost, Furton Subsector, Ultima Segmentum, unknown date M34. Receiving information that a Night Lord's warband, the Profane Dread, was making a move against an isolated Space Marine chapter in a system with a valuable Forge World and Hive World, Ogdramok bade his warriors ready for immediate warp travel. While en route to the star system, he made contact with the leader of the Night Lord's force, known as Credia, and made a bargain of mutual assistance. If the Night Lords intervene and harass any guard or marine forces while the Iron Scourge loot and raise the Forge World, then they would equally share the plunder of technology and slaves. To ensure the agreement would hold for both sides, 2 squads of high-ranking Profane Dread would be under command of Ogdramok, and 2 squads of high-ranking Iron Scourge would likewise be under command of the Night Lords. While never trusting each other at all, both parties agreed. Monas' squad and a heavy weapons team were sent to the ship of the other warband to assist, and to be held as hostages. Despite trying to just get his head down and mind his business, a Night Raptor Marine in scavenged Corvus pattern armor and a jump pack had tried to speak with him about his armor. And with time, he began to reciprocate the attention, eventually sparking a comradeship while fighting against the small host of Astartes. The Night Lord, named Fyron Vars, ended up fighting side by side with Monas. The Night Lord swiping at enemies with lightning claws and Monas crushing foes with his cog-tooled maul. Both warbands succeeded in their objectives and fled to an isolated Imperial outpost at the edge of the system. There, oaths of brotherhood were sworn, and a comradeship not seen since the Great Crusade was first kindled. This was the event that saw the 4th Legion's 27th Line Company from the 3rd Grand Battalion dubbed as the Iron Scourge. Girov, Orbital Battle and Planetary Assault, unknown date M35. After a few decades on Medringard replenishing, repairing and rebuilding their forces, the Iron Scourge immediately sought battle and found it with a fleet of Imperial trade vessels guarded by a single cruiser and smaller destroyers. This conflict took place above the high world of Girov. The guns of the Bone Rod, having been imbued with the malevolent sentience of the Neverborn, demolished the trade vessels and overloaded the shields of the heavier craft. Broadsides were exchanged, though the armor and void shields of the 4th Legion vessel managed to withstand the barrages long enough to send boarding craft onto the other ships. Monas was sent aboard the main cruiser with his squad, while other warriors were readying to board the destroyers. Slaughtering their way to the engine decks first, they disabled them from the inside, leaving it crippled, and then, causing as much disorder as possible, Monas withdrew to the Bone Rod, his task completed. The other squads were also successful in their tasks, being Astartes facing mere mortals. With the fighting ships crippled and adrift in the void with nothing but their guns uselessly straining to aim back at the 4th Legion vessels without engines to bring them to bear, they were dismantled one at a time and their destroyed carcasses left to be pulled into the gravity of the nearby planet where billions lived. The ground war was short and bloody, only lasting a day and a half of overrunning the 3 hives. The resistance was stubborn at first, but collapsed after multiple orbital high-explosive shells were sent sailing into the tallest structures. Slaves were gathered, and PDF rounded into soldiers to serve. Druna System, unknown date M36. Hailed by the Grand Company of Iron Warriors, known as the Vargarian Guard, while raiding near Medringard. The Iron Scourge was told to meet the other group of stalwart warriors upon a large and desolate asteroid in real space as a place of neutral ground. Once there, Ogdramok waited nearby, still aboard the Bone Rod, until the other warband appeared. Though they only had to wait a few hours before the imposing ship that belonged to the Vargarian Guard appeared in close proximity to them, weapons obviously primed in case discussions turned hostile. Warsmith Alaric and Warpsmith Ogdramok took their trusted warriors and met on the pitted and bleak surface of the asteroid to converse and plan the invasion of the Druna system. 3 out of 5 planets in that system were either fortress or mustering worlds of the Imperial Guard, while the other 2 were a forge world and a mining world, used to supply the hordes of nameless bolt fodder. The prizes for seizing the system were very rich and tempting targets for both warbands, and their leaders came to an agreement of equal shares of material and slaves. The invasion planned quickly, with the first strikes to be the transport vessels of the Imperial Navy, leaving the soldiers stranded on their planets, as well as the orbital stations and docks of the Forge World, Druna Quintios. With the Iron Scourge blockading the Forge World and Vargarian Guards securing the atmosphere of the smallest producer of soldiers, Druna Tertios, the small Iron Warriors fleet began the ground assault of the respective planets to cripple the manufactories and hub areas, gaining their victories almost in tandem despite being literal worlds apart. The Iron Warriors' organization and strategies were flawless. Taking minimal losses and countering anything the Imperials assaulted with, once Tertios and Quintios had been beaten into submission and the foundries and hives obliterated from orbit after taking everything of value, they moved together on Secundias, a planet with 957,000 trained and equipped professional soldiers, by far the most numerous force of soldiers in the system. They attacked from either pole, distributing demon engines and heavy armor to break through the lines and create terror among the mortals that survived. Tanks clashed with one another, and troop transports were shredded apart by demonic metal claws. The taking of this planet only lasted 3 days, with roughly 200,000 mortals taken prisoner and multiple formations of various super heavy tanks as well. With this world in their grasp, the remaining two worlds were a respite in terms of retaliation. Primus practically fully surrendered, and the mining planet Servok was bare of any actual fighting force besides servitors. With their goals achieved, and the materials and men divided amongst the two forces, Alaric and Ogdrumok saluted in the old crusade fashion and parted with mutual satisfaction and a promise of allying once more. Orin, unknown date, M37. Void war against the small and isolated Mechanicus exploratory fleet. Many boarding actions and void fighter battles were fought. The bone rod was badly damaged when victory was achieved, however, and limped back into the Sea of Souls, though the warp drives sustained unnoticed damage. So, they ended up in the middle of an orbital assault between the previous allies of the Profane Dread and a Space Marine home planet named Tezafor, belonging to the Charnel Chieftain's Space Marine chapter. Tezafor, unknown date, M37. The planet itself was a mere feral world. The humans were in a tribal age of iron and bronze, offering their sons to the imposing armored gods that were their overlords. There was only a single, yet well-equipped Astartes vessel belonging to the chapter facing off against the sleek, blade-like destroyer of the 8th Legion warband. Void fighters belonging to each faction skirmished each other between the 2 kilometers-long Leviathans. Neither side could gain the edge over the other. The Night Lord's fighters were more agile and experienced, but their weapons were not functioning properly due to carelessness and irreparable damage from past battles, and the Charnel Chieftain's craft were too few to fight in formation, so they could only bait each other into range of the larger ship's guns. This lasted for an hour until the Iron Scourge materialized above the battlesphere in their battle barge, the Bone Rod. Venting filth and shrouded in smog from its wounds, Neverborn ghosted into reality as the warp tear opened to let it slide into real space, but closed as soon as the gigantic armored Void Wallower came into the material realm. Upon hailing the Night Lord commander and surveying the situation, Ogdrumok had his forces open fire against the Astartes ship and hammer it with shield-cracking ordnance. The Charnel Chieftains, seeing that they were outgunned and outnumbered, began to withdraw their fighters and make preparations to retreat. However, they would not make it so far as to even get every Astartes aboard before the 2 Traitor Legion ships combined their strength to dismantle the Charnel Chieftain's cruiser, called the Glorious Revenant, by lance and cannon fire. Gaining respite and prisoners through victory, salvage teams were sent to scavenge any tech and materials from the bones of the now dead ship that was slowly being dragged by gravity to the feudal planet. Credia, the leader of the Profane Dread, eagerly thanked Ogdrumok of the Iron Scourge, and the 2 warbands exchanged greetings, or what passed for them between the 2 traitor legions. Saluthea, 9th Black Crusade, 537 M38. The warband gaining a tally of victories against mighty and worthy foes, and a reputation of being the source for reliable and powerful demon engines because of Ogdrumok over the many centuries, had not gone unnoticed by greater and more influential forces within the Eye. As Abaddon the Despoiler was planning his 9th Black Crusade, he conveyed orders to the Iron Scourge, intending to have them serve as a distraction while the main forces of this Black Legion waged war in a different part of the sector, soon to be mired in war. Ogdrumok and his forces would be charged to fight aside a larger warband dedicated to Nurgle, the Purge. The Iron Scourge, shunning all who serve the powers of chaos, barely regarded them as equal in terms of conviction and will. Those who follow Nurgle may be resistant and hardy, but the source of those traits come not from their own might, but are poisoned blessings from that sentient sack of rotting corpses as Grandfather Nurgle. The 4th Legion warriors did not communicate or even acknowledge the other force, only stopping to share battle plans and the locations and distributions of men and armor. Nevertheless, they equally complemented each other's tactics without meaning to, the 4th essentially using them as cover to reach objectives, though none of Perturba's sons could withstand the sight or smell of Nurgle's blessings upon the corrupted forms of the other Astartes. With the plans executed to design and Iron Warriors all back aboard their own vessel, they left the battle zones as soon as sending an astropathic message to Abaddon's heralds. Each Iron Warrior that survived vowed never to be in the presence of someone or something corrupted by Nurgle ever again. Vern, unknown date M39. During an excursion to a weak Imperial-held system for slave raiding, the warband came across an ancient space hulk drifting in the outer reaches of the three-planet system. Auspex scans indicated that there could be possible archaeotech aboard, as one of the wrecks appeared to be an ancient human design, but not at all similar in appearance to the vessel used by humanity in the past 10 millennia. Keeping its distance from the hulk and sending 3 squads of warriors and 6 Dark Mechanicum tech priests aboard the section of hulk belonging to the ancient human wreckage, the Bone Rod kept its guns loaded and aimed at the possibly dangerous debris. Monas was leading his squad of specialized close combat marines. Though the other 2 squads comprised 6 warriors, each clad in warp-changed cataphracti Terminator armor, all with tusked helms mirroring Monas' tusked skull-shaped Mark III helmet. The warriors serving under Monas in his squad of 13 all had hand-to-hand weapons, and even 7 carried shields, just as he did. Fracon carried a meltagun, breaching shield, and a Legion Gladius, though it remained sheathed on his waist. Spreading throughout the twisted and mangled mess that used to be service hallways and meeting halls, each squad was in constant contact with the other commanders in the bridge of the Bone Rod. Reports of warp-twisted hallways were all Ogdrumok heard until the 3rd Breacher Squad under Monas sent back that he had found an ancient artificing chamber. When the tech priest's servitors were ordered to strip all technology within the room, the walls started to bulge suddenly, alarming the tech priests and fighters. They opened fire immediately, and what looked like a demon-possessed automata with drills and hammers and flamethrower tools instead of appendages came marching out of the collapsed section of wall. Monas and his squad beat back the corrupted machines and notified the other 2 squads, warning them of the enemies now present. 10 minutes of holding a small shield wall formation against the wave of tainted abominations later, and the other Terminators arrived, fighting back their own demonic foe. With the support of 12 Astartes in tactical dreadnought armor, they pummeled a hasty withdrawal to the boarding craft and secured the archaeotech on the Bone Rod. Thasev 2, Inside the Eye of Terror, unknown date, M40. A conflict arose between a small group of 150 4th Legion warriors and a band of renegade Astartes who had once been the Argent Warden's chapter on a neutral asteroid cluster, the Thasev Halo. A firefight broke out and lasted until the Iron Scourge set foot and interrupted the combat by sending drop pods in the combat zone and slaying all enemy Astartes on the asteroid, 37 in total. The Argent Wardens were retreated in the sight of a more numerous and deadly foe. Ogdrumok had once owed a favor to the leader of the small force and decided it was better to pay the debt now. Monas had descended to the fighting, blasting 3 renegade Astartes with plasma pistol and breaking the bodies of another 4 with his maul. Lyrov system, unknown date, M41. The worlds of the Lyrov system had once been in the grip of the Imperium, but had since been overrun with a Tau. The Xenos had superior technology, but were already spread thin across the worlds when the Iron Scourge came to raid and wreak havoc. Taking the small Xenos fleet by surprise when the comparably small Iron Warriors fleet materialized in real space. The Iron Scourge consisted of the Bone Rod battle barge, a Hellbringer light cruiser named the Decimator, and 2 Infidel-class raiders, one named Vindicator and the other called Wrecker. These ships spread out in formation and began to make headway to the Tau vessels, the Bone Rod leading the charge. There were only 5 small Tau ships of possibly cruiser class. The 4th Legion fleet engaged and shipborne weapons cracked out in anger. Vindication was destroyed and the Decimator was badly crippled, but it was the boarding teams of Astartes that had eventually put the Xenos fleet down, destroying engine decks and controls. Setting melter charges on the bridges and letting them be torn apart from munitions explosions. Monas was aboard the enemy command vessel and slowed his way to the ship's bridge to crush the last real resistance out of the Xenos, executing what looked like the ship's captain and his bodyguards. 13th Black Crusade, Cadia System, 999 M41. Heeding the despoiler's call to muster at the edge of the Eye as part of the galaxy-ending fleet assembling there for the 13th Black Crusade, Ogdromok took his warriors and functional ships together with the other traitor warbands. The Bone Wrought and the Decimator arrived in formation alongside other Iron Warriors dreadnoughts, all battle-scarred from old and new wounds and just as proud as they once had been during the Crusade. The task given to the Iron Scourge was to attack the defenses around Agrippina and aid in the ground assaults. The orders given were carried out to the letter, despite having to fight with the blood-maddened lunatics of the World Eaters and the insufferable arrogance of the Word-Bearers. Though during the latter stages of the ground assault, night-raptor teams of the Profane Dread descending in drop pods to harass and draw away the Mechanicus Skitarii, threatening the flanks of the advancing Iron Scourge and the World Eaters' assault squads. Monas was briefly hailed on his personal vox, being greeted by Fire and Vars as he swooped in and shredded apart a Skitarii captain in view of Monas. Then he rocketed away as quick as he came to another vulnerable target. When the Cadian Gate fell and the Chaos Fleet reassembled, the Profane Dread's ship, named the Gleaming Blade, and the Bone Wrought drifted parallel while vox hails were exchanged. Current activity M42. Fetho Cluster, unknown date M42. After assisting in the attack on the Cadian system, Ogdromok was free to lead his warriors further into Imperial space and raid as they saw fit. However, due to the disruption caused by the Great Rift, their warp engines misfired and the vessel of the Iron Scourge was sent into a region of space held by the Tau. The expansive asteroid field belonging to the Earth caste, the Fetho Cluster, who used it for mining and as a relay or resupplying point for cargo transports, was where they had found themselves. Already prepared for a fight and manning battle stations, the crew and warriors had mustered at weapon stations, void fighters, dropships, and boarding torpedoes. Upon seeing the telltale signs of Xena's craft at the edge of the field, the Bone Wrought bade its smaller support ships to keep close and defend every avenue of attack in case ambushes were laid in amongst the humongous chunks of asteroid. Drifting to the nearest outpost visible to the Auspex and obliterating asteroids in their direct path, the Iron Warriors' fleet was predictably ambushed by a more numerous but less in firepower fleet of large Tau bulk haulers. Not wishing to completely destroy valuable salvage, Ogdromok ordered squads of assault marines, havocs, and support troops of the Varrocan host equipped for void warfare to board the enemy fleet and eliminate all crew except the command staff who would be taken prisoner. Sergeant Monas and his squad took the largest of the Tau ships with ease, and the 10 other assault squads had taken the others with no casualties as well. When the Xena's fleet was subjugated and its leaders interrogated, then subsequently executed, the 4th Legion force made its way deeper into the territory of open void they had discovered was south of the Ultima Segmentum on the edges of the Tau Empire. However, with the Cicatrix Maledictum now allowing easy passage in and out of the warp, the forces of Nurgle had claimed a nearby area of space as well. Now possibly facing attacks from 3 different factions, the Iron Scourge began thoroughly and carefully scanning and navigating the void to hopefully less hostile system. The hierarchy of this 4th Legion force echoes that of the Primarch's own inner council. There are 3 members of the Iron Scourge that assist and discuss matters of import with Ogdromok: Tech Priest Krytek, Sergeant Monas, and Chief Apothecary Deracletus. This formation is known as the Triptychon. The Iron Scourge rely on overwhelming infantry assaults to gain footholds in the enemy lines. Once that has been achieved, troop transports are sent in to bolster the entrenched assault squads and heavy armor support to fire upon the foe. Preferring open war to the stagnant nature of siegecraft, they nevertheless excel at tearing down fortifications, usually blasting and digging tunnels to secure breaches and sending troops to attack from underneath the enemy while the heavy guns continue to bombard the structures. When fighting in void combat, the Iron Scourge often deploy boarding torpedoes to dismantle enemy ships from within and preventing them to fire upon their own craft. If boarded themselves, heavy weapons team and close assault squads are immediately sent to resist and push back the boarders before they can delve into the ship's guts to harass and distract the crew and fighters. The core significance of the Iron Litany permeates each member of the warband, from the lowliest mortal breach fodder to renowned Astartes champions. To rely on anything else is weakness and is to be exercised and despised. To be corrupted by the touch of the gods and be granted quote-unquote boons is weakness, for if you cannot accomplish your task without the supposed aid of deities, you are weak. No belief or worship of gods will be tolerated within the ranks. Self-reliance and mighty conviction in your actions are all that matter and are all that will see the battle end in victory and your foes vanquished. For these reasons, the warriors of the Iron Scourge vehemently abhor the Imperium for their veneration of the rotting husk on Terra. Likewise, with the various warbands that inhabit the Great Eye, who give benediction to the despotic powers of the warp. They will utilize demon engines and the cult of destruction, but only see them as near-sentient munitions to be spent in the transaction of war. Untainted human lives are far more precious and reliable than the crazed preacher that every citizen of the Imperium seems to be, or the diseased minds of the baying hordes that willingly throw themselves at the feet of uncaring gods. If mutation is found on an Astartes or a human mortal, it is severed with haste and a bionic replacement fitted in place of the tainted flesh. For none can truly escape the innate changing touch of the warp while residing within it.